Today we are ranking all of the level 1 portions of the adventures of all of the 5th edition modules. Today I'm going to be going over basically what is to be expected at level 1 and most important of all, if it's good or if it's not good. So I'm going to be going into spoilers, but when I cover each of them, the first portion of talking about it is going to be no spoilers, and then the second portion of it will be spoilers, at which point when I do dive into the spoilers, I'll warn you ahead of time, and it'll be appearing on the screen. If you want to skip past that portion with the spoiler for any one individual thing, then you can just go by chapter, which should be on the YouTube link there or in the description down below. For the instances of today's video, I'll be going through in chronological order of when the adventure was released. I do want to see if level 1 portions of all these adventures have gotten better, or more importantly, if they've gotten worse over time. So let's get cracking with the very beginning adventure here, The Lost Mine of Phandelver. So this is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most classic of all of these adventures because that is the one that kicked off a lot of the 5e. That is the one a lot of people have gone through. And most notably, it is basically just a tier 1 adventure. You do start off as level 1, but then quickly dive through to level 2, 3, and 4, spend a decent amount of time there, and you cap out at 5, where presumably you're going to take that adventure and go do other fun adventures. So what I'll say is, the level 1 portion of this adventure is actually, sadly, one of the weakest parts of this adventure. The level 1 portion of it is not great at all, in my opinion. It definitely kicks things off in a way, but I don't think it's a good way. So for the instances of the review here, I am going to put it as not exactly the absolute worst, but I'm going to put it down there near the bottom. Now going on to spoilers. So why is it that the level 1 portion of Lost Mine of Phandelver sucks as a level 1 portion? Is because goblins in an ambush are OP. It's because goblins are actually incredibly deadly at level 1. A lot of people forget that, you know, when you're level 1, you're a glass cannon, and goblins are glass cannons. But most important of all, in the scenario of the goblin ambush right there at the start of the adventure, your players are actually at a loss. Your players are more than likely going to be on the downhill side of things. And that really sucks. Level 1s are not supposed to be going up against that many goblins. And also later on in that cave, they go up against a bugbear. At level 1, you're asking your players for quite a lot. And if they are absolutely not prepared, and if they're not lucky enough, then unfortunately they are going to lose. There is a real possibility that your party is not able to go through the goblin ambush and the caves without taking several long rests. It's just really difficult. And also is, I feel like at the level 1 there's no sort of role play to be had other than just the interactions you have with the goblin and the bugbear, but those basically boil down to combat. Next up, we have the Tyranny of the Dragons, which was once 2 adventures. It used to be the Hoard of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat, but it's lumped into one because essentially it is the same adventure. The Rise of Tiamat level 1 experience. Oh boy, man, for being the first published 5e actual adventure module that took over a larger space than just levels 1 to 5, you'd think that they would try to kick things off with a strong level 1. And what I'll say is thematically level 1 is great because you're going into this crazy experience, but unfortunately that crazy experience does not translate well to level 1. Unfortunately, I'm going to put it down there near-ish the bottom. It's probably going to be one of the worser ones. Not absolutely the worst, but it's definitely going to be bad. Because, my goodness, it's just asking, once again, just quite a lot for level 1s. Now into spoiler territory. The real problem with this level 1 portion of the adventure is your players are going up against cultists and kobolds and dragons, oh my. There is just so much going on. Your players are basically going to this town, and the town is getting ransacked. And yeah, it does have that cool epic feeling of a D&D adventure where your players are plopped into the middle of an adventure and they just have to figure out what's going on. That part is really cool. But the issue is mechanically, your players are going up against quite a lot, and if they get hit even one time at all, then basically all their resources are spent. If you have any spellcasters, they're going to be out of spells by the second encounter, essentially. So there's just like so much going on, and Unfortunately, I think that they probably should have had a tiny little introductory thing at level 1 and then had the epic town being destroyed at level 2. I think that could have been a little bit better. Now on to Princes of the Apocolypse. For those of you that have followed my other tier guides, you might know that I don't hold princes in the highest regards. But that being said, my issue with Prince of the Apocolypse is more so along the lines of the middle game. I like the beginning and I like the end game. So Prince of the Apocolypse at level 1 actually has us interacting with a quaint little town and a whole bunch of little quests surrounding it. This is actually really fun. There's a lot of fun little encounters and little things that your players get to interact with at level 1. So I'm actually going to put level 1 of the adventure at good-ish. Surprising, I know, considering I kind of hold the rest of the book in disregard. But that beginning portion is actually pretty awesome. You can hand out a bunch of these little clues, rumors, and quests to your players, and they can figure out which one they want to get into. And that beginning portion is awesome. Now onto the spoiler territory here. In regards of some of the more standout ones, one of my most favorites is your players go to investigate a cave and find out that there's a necromancer in there. And they go and fight some undead, and then they fight the necromancer himself. Really, really awesome. I actually love it. Because, you know, if your players are smart, they can tackle the undead incredibly easily. And if you have 4 players just up against one necromancer, then they should be able to charge on through. He does have a wand of magic missiles, which is probably going to down at least one PC. But your players should be able to power through, get the guy, and be able to get a magical item and get a cool story out of it. You know, that is just, that one right there is totally awesome. But there's many others in that level 1 portion of Prince of the Apocolypse. And they're all really cute. You know, maybe they're not necessarily cute, but, you know, some of them are cool. I really dig it. And now looking at the level 1 portion of Out of the Abyss. Out of the Abyss is an absolute staple in my eye because, my goodness, do I love this adventure. It's the one that actually got me into all of tabletop role-playing games, so I'm very thankful for Out of the Abyss. So the level 1 portion of this adventure is unlike any other level 1 adventure ever. I know that going through this list, we're going to see several tropes that kind of overlap each other. Nothing compares to Out of the Abyss's beginning. Nothing, and that's a good thing. It sticks out well on its own. It's got a very memorable intro, and because of the fact that it is memorable, it is exciting, and it's fresh, it's actually going up there, right there at the top. It is fan-frickin-tastic. Now on to the spoiler side of things. What makes it fan-frickin-tastic? That is because your players are dealing with an escape. They're getting out of prison. That's so cool, right? So right off the bat, we've got this cool synopsis of, okay, you're imprisoned and you need to get out. But then throw into the mix of, oh, hey, you're actually underground. Oh, and hey, yeah, your captors are drows and they're totally evil because they are doing a whole bunch of nefarious things. Oh, and by the way, as your players are about to escape, a whole bunch of demons start attacking. So just throwing a whole bunch of crazy chaoticness at your players is awesome. And most important of all is those NPCs that your players are going to meet. So I know that there's a lot of issues with some people saying, oh, there's too many NPCs to keep track of. But that's beside the point. You can kill off all those NPCs during the escape. You can kill them off right after the escape. You can peter out all those NPCs throughout the course of the adventure, no problem. I think that the NPCs definitely add a lot to the escape itself, because how your players go about escaping this location is totally great. And it makes your players feel awesome that if they're these level 1 nobodies, that they can tackle some drow while they're distracted. They can beat up on that injured Vrock. You know, that one's just totally cool. I absolutely love this level 1 beginning intro. Now on to Curse of Strahd. Regarded as one of the best adventures in all of 5e, Curse of Strahd has a strong campaign through and through. But what I'm going to say is, Level 1 is not exactly its forte. Level 1 is always one of those things where you want to throw the 3 pillars of D&D at them. You want to throw in some combat, exploration, roleplay. But the roleplay is, easy to do no matter what level. The exploration, depending on what kind of trap and what kind of obstacles your players are going up against, level 1's still doable. But it's the combat that's the tricky part. And unfortunately, that's where Curse of Strahd sort of falls flat. For Curse of Strahd, I am definitely going to put the level 1 portion of the adventure at I'd say it goes above Lost Mine, but definitely is not that great. It's definitely on the lower tier of things. Now, on the spoiler side of things, why is that? Why is the Curse of Strahd level 1 portion of the adventure weak? The entirety of the level 1 portion has your players going to the Death House, where they climb up a tower of terror, and they are potentially going up against an animated armor, a banshee, an animated broom, and dealing with some ghost kids. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot going on there in regards of the exploration, because they're just basically climbing up this thing. They can find a secret compartment, which is actually pretty cool. But more importantly is the fact that the combat is just absolutely insanely deathly, and it's very quick, right? Level 1 adventures should be quick. They should be done in a single session usually. But just the combat, is ridiculous, because the animated armor can easily mob the floor of some parties. The Spectre there will totally kill some PCs. I've actually had it kill multiple PCs sometimes. So that Death House level 1 intro there as your players are climbing up is deadly. And not that it matters for this tier listing, but the level 2 portion is also incredibly deadly as well. In fact, the level 2 gets even deadlier. It's funny how your players get stronger, and in fact, it's actually more likely for them to die. But like I said, I'm definitely putting Curse of Strahd on the weaker side of things. Storm King's Thunder. We have our globe-trotting experience in Storm King's Thunder, but you start off with humble beginnings. Interesting about Storm King's Thunder is it actually recommends that you just skip over the whole levels 1 through 4 thing and get your players right to 5, so they get into all the juicy bits, but it does of course include the level 1 location. So the level 1 adventure is, it certainly is an adventure. It's certainly a thing. The level 1 portion of Storm King's Thunder is purely there to get the ball rolling. It's purely there to get your players introduced to the adventure as a whole. Even if it's not them learning all of the details, they're certainly getting an idea of what's going on. But it doesn't lean in heavily toward the adventure at hand, and it is just meh. So it's actually going right there smack dab in the middle there. It's a meh level 1 adventure. Now on to the spoiler side of things. Why is it meh? The reason why is because your players show up to a town that has currently been hit by some rocks, and your players explore around the town and get into some fights with some goblins. And the goblins are spread about all over the place. Some of the goblins are in some of the locations, and some of the goblins are more out there in the open. But that's it. That's the entirety of the level 1 adventure. It is just your players showing up to a destroyed location. There's some goblins. You fight the goblins. That's it. It's so incredibly mundane, and I understand why it had to be. I understand why they couldn't throw giants at your players at level 1, because that'd be ridiculous. But I feel like they should have done a little bit more, because the level 1 portion of it's pretty boring. Continuing on past the level 1 portion there, it definitely ramps up the tension, because right after there's some orcs, and then your players go into a place and there's like a jelly in there. There's a whole bunch of interesting things. But Storm King's Thunder, for as strong of the campaign as it is for the rest of the adventure, that level 1 through 4 beginning there is purely there for the people that want to go from level 1 to level 5. Which, what I'd say is you don't need to. You can easily start off a campaign as level 5. Just like that. Now on to Tales from the Yawning Portal, the first blast from the past adventure here. This one is interesting because it's not a full-blown adventure module, of course, but there is a level 1 adventure in there in the form of the Sunless Citadel. The Sunless Citadel is a classic adventure. It definitely hits that level 1 to 3 vibe. So how does the level 1 portion of this adventure play out, the Sunless Citadel, specifically the level 1 area? I would say it's actually pretty good. I would say that it's definitely, I'm really tied between putting it at the top and at the second to top there. It's really tough for me because it definitely hits all 3 pillars that I want. It's just really solid. So I'm actually going to put it up there at fan-friggin-tastic. I'm going to put it there right at the top. So going on to the spoiler side of things, what makes it great? It hits those 3 pillars well. You've got the exploration of this destroyed ruin at the bottom of a ravine. Totally awesome. You've got the roleplay side of things where you're dealing with kobolds, which normally are not, the good guys, but in this instance, they are the good guys. And then you get the combat of dealing with some goblins and some hobgoblins. Really, really cool. And there's actually the added side of things of if your players are willing to do more exploration, then they actually get to go to a whole nother secret portion of the side there, and they can get into a whole bunch of more shenanigans, and they can get into a fight with a troll, but the troll is somewhat damaged, so it's an entirely different combat, but whatever. The level 1 portion of this is actually great. It definitely serves as the classic tried and true D&D experience, and I absolutely love it for it. The Sunless Citadel is a classic, and for a good reason. And now on to my most favorite of all the 5e adventure modules, Tomb of Annihilation. So Tomb of Annihilation is just an absolute blast. I love it to pieces, and the thing is while I love the adventure, that's because I kind of gloss over that level 1 experience. The level 1 experience is actually incredibly terrible. As written, the level 1 experience is not good at all. So I'm definitely going to put it at... Oh man, I'm going to have to put it either at the bottom or next to the bottom. I'm going to put it... I think I'm actually going to put it at the bottom, but I'm going to put it above Tyranny of Dragons. So, what I'll say is, before I get to the spoilers, is the level 1 experience is so vastly different. There is no controlling the level 1 experience as written. Now on to the spoiler side of things. Why is there no controlling it? So, with level 1, your players show up to Port Nyanzaru, and they explore around the port for a little bit, and then they go off into the jungles. So as written, your players are still level 1 when they go into the jungles. And that's really bad because if you go completely as written, there is the possibility that you roll up a random encounter and they could go up against a zombie T-Rex at level 1. As written, that is entirely a possibility. Unlike every other module in this entire lineup, ToA did not have a level 1 adventure. It did not have a level 1 go-to quest. ToA basically just starts off with a sandbox saying, hey, there's the jungle, go explore the jungle. So there is absolutely no telling what the heck level 1 adventures are going to be in Tomb of Annihilation. I know that a lot of DMs are going to hand wave it and say, oh yeah, your players explore around Port Nyanzaru and they level up before they go to the jungles. But as written, that is technically not the case. But, you know, don't run everything as written. Do whatever it is that you need to do. Now on to Waterdeep Dragon Heist. My goodness, what a classic. Waterdeep Dragon Heist sees us in Waterdeep, where our players are trying to earn gold, as all people do in this world. So the level 1 portion of Waterdeep Dragon Heist sees us starting off in the classic rendition of all D&D of you start in a tavern. You know, right there, that immediately earns a bunch of points from me, but more so is the adventure that it wraps you in. The level 1 portion of this adventure starts the setup chain of what is going to be in a dynamic roller coaster of an adventure. And I'm going to put it at a goodish. I'm definitely going to put it up there. It's certainly a solid one. It's not exactly the best, but, you know, it serves its purpose. It certainly, like I said before, you know, gets the ball rolling, and it definitely introduces you to the city therein. And also, very importantly, is a lot of named NPCs. So on the spoiler side of things, those named NPCs include the likes of Volo Thamp Gadarm, aka Volo. It includes Renaer Neverember. It includes a whole bunch of other people. And also, very importantly, is it just gets you involved in what's going on in Waterdeep. The fact that there is a war between the Zentarum and how all this talk of a whole bunch of gold being embezzled. And, you know, it just keeps on setting up a bunch of things. And I like that. I like the fact that it foreshadows a bunch of things. And it actually really kicks things off well because there's both a tavern brawl and then a troll popping out of the Yawning Portal itself. And then Durnan can come out swinging and show off how awesome he is. You know, that is really, really cool, right? So the level 1 portion of it is great. And then your players go off to find a one Floon, and in doing so, they get into a fight with the Xanathar Guild. And that fight's actually really cool because your players go up against a Spellcaster, you know, which is normally scary, but at level 1, that Orc Spellcaster is actually really bad too. And also, your players get to meet up with a Mind Flayer, but the Mind Flayer simply just walks off. You know, those foreshadowing things of dealing with a whole bunch of weird, wacky, zany things is a great way to kick off the adventure. But what I will say is, at level 1, there is certainly potential for your players to try and go off in various directions. Your players may not actually understand what's going on. And if you don't have it expressly told, like, hey, you know, this is the adventure to go do it, they may try and wander off in other places and all that stuff. But my goodness, that quest reward is well worth it, because at a level 1 adventure, your players earn themselves a mansion, which is totally cool. I have Waterdeep Dungeon Mad Mage on here, but that's because I'm using this list for a whole bunch of other things. The Waterdeep Dungeon the Mad Mage starts off at level 5, so there is no level 1 adventure there. Now kicking off Ghost of Saltmarsh. So Ghost of Saltmarsh, the second anthology here. This one is also a blast from the past. The level 1 adventure found therein is the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, which is once again an absolute classic. This actually dates almost all the way back in all of D&D. A classic, amazing adventure. The level 1 portion of this adventure is absolutely great. This is the stuff of where legends are made of. This is how you kick off a D&D campaign where you want the emphasis being on sort of the old school style of D&D. Ghost of Saltmarsh is definitely going up there. I'm actually going to put it above Tales from the Yawning Portal, and do I put it above Out of the Abyss? I'm going to go ahead and say yeah. I'm going to say yeah. And the reason for that is because the level 1 portion does what a lot of adventures try to do but cannot do. It certainly hits levels of magic that, you know, quite frankly, can be done anywhere else. Now on the spoiler side of things, what makes the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh so great? It is because you hype up your players into the knowledge that they are about to fight some haunted mansion, that they're about to go up against some ghoulies and ghosts and whatever else. But it's all a ruse. That is just so great. Your players show up to play a fantastical game of D&D, and they think that there is going to be all these mystical weird things. But then guess what? It's all mundane. It's all a Scooby-Doo act. And that right there just makes it feel real. And of course, a whole bunch of bandits would, you know, prop up some rumor that there's a haunted mansion so that they could use it for their own nefarious deeds. That just makes sense. And the Ghost of Saltmarsh, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is just so good. You know, that level 1 portion of the adventure is just absolutely fantastic, and it keeps your players on edge. And once they finally go through the whole thing and figure it out, then they're going to have a good laugh as well. Now on to Dragons of Icespire Peak. So, Dragons of Icespire Peak is another intro adventure, levels 1 to 5, basically trying to replicate the success that Lost Mines of Phandelver had. Dragons of Icespire Peak, that one is very unique in that the other adventure started off with a railroad and then expanded into a sandbox. This one kicks off right immediately with a sandbox. So the level 1 adventure is not a predetermined exact one adventure. It could be multiple. That being said though, even with a bevy of options, I'm actually going to put it pretty freaking low. And I'm actually going to put it down at... Oh man, I'm actually going to put it down at... I'm going to put it down at Y. Same thing with Lost Mine of Phandelver. So, Dragon of Icespire Peak, the level 1 portion of the adventure, is so weak. It is so not what I think a lot of people think about when it comes to D&D. I think that they should have probably did some revisions with that. Now, spoiler territory on why the level 1 portion of this adventure sucks is because it doesn't truly interact with a sort of roleplay element. It doesn't go too heavily in the exploration elements. So you get 3 quests right off the gate. You're supposed to hand your players 3 quest little hooks there, and they can follow any which one. So the thing is, though, is 2 of them are designed for levels 1 to 2-ish, and then one of them is designed for specifically level 3. So why are you giving your players a level 3 adventure when they're only level 1? Because, you know, if they go to that level 3 adventure, they're going to die. Straight up, they're just totally going to die. And even the level 1 portions of the adventure are actually incredibly deadly. We see our players going up against a bevy of enemies, and that's actually not good. I think it's just weak overall. It's not like oh, this is the worst thing ever, but it's definitely just you know, I feel like they could have introduced some sort of actual adventure in this, right? Descent into Avernus, or Avernus, however it is that you say it. What is the level 1 portion of this adventure coming down to? We see ourselves not doing any exploration at all whatsoever. It is just purely roleplay and combat. But is that roleplay and combat sufficient? Is it good? Is it dynamic? Is it fun? It certainly could potentially be, maybe sometimes. It is just smack dab in the middle there of, it's serviceable, it could work, I guess, maybe. Now, why is that for spoiler territory here? And the reason for that is because we see our players in an inn, and all that happens is your players talk to a few NPCs, and then a bandit captain and a whole bunch of bandits come in here, and your players are presumably going to fight them. So a bandit captain, right off the gate, it can easily wipe a level 1 party just by themselves, but there's a whole bunch of bandits as well. So what's supposed to happen is your players are supposed to recruit a whole bunch of NPCs along the way, but guess what? There is a very real possibility that your players do not get all of the other NPCs involved. And in fact, actually, as written, the bandit captain can get other NPCs involved in attacking the party. So right there is this huge dilemma of your party is presumably outnumbered. They may not interact with the other NPCs. Even if they try to interact with the other NPCs, it's a DC 15 persuasion check, which at level 1, you're only going to have presumably at best a +5. So it's still somewhat unlikely that you're going to get these NPCs to help you out. And there is just, it's just not a pleasant one in that regard. That being said, though, when it does work, when your players get all of the NPCs to help out, it's actually pretty cool because it's just a classic bar brawl. But it's certainly just one of those things of, okay, you could clearly tell that they were hand-waving this level 1 portion of the adventure because they wanted to get on to better things. But that being said, anybody that's cracked open that book knows that the level 2 portion is not good either. Here's looking at you, level 2 Fireball. And now we have Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. This book, my goodness, where we see that some of the other adventures have us going exactly down one level 1 quest, and some of these maybe having 2 or 3 options. Icewind Dale said, hey, we'll raise you 10. There is so many potential level 1 adventures in this adventure. So it's really hard to say specifically, like, if one is better than the other, or should I grade them all equally or separately? I'm going to grade it all as one, and I'm going to say overall, that experience sucks. Unfortunately, another one of the adventures that I like, but I know is not going to be regarded as one of the greatest. My goodness, the level 1 adventures were not written for level 1 PCs, or if they were written with the intention that PCs are going to die. That's just the truth of it. A lot of the adventures were written with the assumption that your players could be showing up at levels 1, 2, or 3. But guess what? The difference between a level 1 adventure, a level 2, and a level 3 is drastically night and day. You cannot compare them. You cannot have adventures be like, oh yeah, they can totally fit for this group of people, because they don't. It just straight up doesn't. So going into the spoilers territory here of why the level 1 adventures suck, let's kick things off. We have your players going up against a mammoth. Your players going up against winter wolves. We have your players going up against yetis. We have your players going up against an awakened plesiosaurus in the middle of a lake. We have the list goes on. And it's ridiculous that your players could potentially be going up against all these trials and tribulations at level 1. Because if they go up against any one of them in the wrong way, it's a flat out TBK. Or if it isn't a TBK, it is definitely some PC's dead. And that's just the way the cookie crumbles. They writ out a whole bunch of different things because they wanted to have a whole bunch of different quests involved. And realistically, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to tailor out the level 1 portion of this adventure, but you don't have to. And as written, I guess they could just be going wherever it is that they go. My goodness, the level 1 portion is just an absolute clown fiesta of TPKs galore. Now we have Candlekeep Mysteries, the 3rd anthology here, which is not a blast from the past. This is 17 wholly unique adventures. So the level 1 portion of this book is the joy of extra-dimensional spaces. Now, my goodness, this level 1 adventure is actually really good. This level 1 portion of the book does cover the 3 pillars: exploration, roleplay, and combat. Roleplay a little bit less, admittedly, but the exploration of a location and the combat therein is actually pretty cute. I am actually going to put it as, honestly, I'm putting it up there. I'm putting up there fan-friggin-tastic. Wow, and that actually makes all 3 anthologies there at the top. That's actually pretty cool. Now, why is this level 1 portion so great going into spoilers here? Because how often do your players get to show up to an extra dimensional space, find themselves trapped in a location, and now they have to find the puzzle pieces to get out? I like that portion of it because it doesn't feel dreadful. It's not like they're trapped in a cage and they're dying to get out. No, it's more so that they just show up to a location and now they've got some time to explore this quaint little mansion and interact with its denizens, get into some cute little fights, and go. That being said, though, not all the fights are cute. The Mimic, if your players get into a fight with a Mimic and they are not prepared, that Mimic, even though it is damaged, actually can totally murk somebody. And your players actually could get swarmed by a bunch of books, which is pretty funny. The Dancing Sword in particular, my goodness, Dancing Swords are actually really scary at level 1 because they have a really high AC. So, the combat is pretty scary here, but they're not really on a time limit, so they're not really too concerned. They can take their time with this. They can short rest as much as they want, even though really only one short rest is going to be able to do what you need to do, right? But the level 1 portion of it actually does fit that fantastical theme of D&D, of doing something that you normally can't do. Your players show up to a location, they get into a fight with a whole bunch of animated objects, and interact with a whole bunch of weird things. And lastly here for the level 1 adventures, we have the Wild Beyond the Witchlight, the newest in the 5e lineup. The level 1 portion of this adventure is... oh my goodness, I'm just gonna drag it right there up to the top. It is definitely fan-friggin-tastic, but where does it rank? I'm gonna put it... ah, man, where do I put this? I'm gonna put it at the lower end of the fan-friggin-tastic at the very top here. But what I will say is, it offers an experience unlike any of the others. As I've mentioned before throughout this whole thing, some of the adventures do somewhat of the same thing, but they do them a little bit differently. Nothing does what the Wild Beyond the Witchlight does. The level 1 experience is something that is not replicated, and it will not be replicated. At least I don't think it will be, and not at least in the 5e lineup anyway. The level 1 portion of this adventure is extremely good, extremely solid. It's definitely worthwhile running for this campaign, and it's actually worthwhile running for other games as well. The level 1 portion of it is easily transferable to any adventure that you run. Now onto the spoiler side of things. What makes the level 1 portion of this so great? It is because it is a carnival. It is because it is fun times. There's mini games, NPCs to interact with, puzzles, a roleplay scenario where your players have to interact and somehow get the bosses to spill the beans. And most important of all, there is potentially no combat. Now, I think that combat is extremely important to the game of D&D because, it is 1/3 of the game. It is 85% of the rules. Combat should be present in our D&D games, but level 1 is really tricky because we want our players to be playing the game, and you can't play the game when you're knocked out half the time. So it makes sense that they just pretty much outright remove combat from this level 1 adventure. And it works well because of the themes at hand of this quaint, fun, delightful carnival. You don't need to get into combat right here. There's plenty of combat throughout the rest of the module. You're good to go there. But the level 1 portion of it is just so whimsical. It's a fun experience. You're not going to have anything like it anywhere else in the 5e lineup because most of the level 1 portions of adventures are not fun. They are scary. They are deadly. They're fierce. But this one right here is going to bring smiles and joys and laughter, not heartbreak, misery, and despair. So just like that, that is me ranking all of the level 1 portions of all of the 5e modules. I think that's a pretty good spread, honestly. We get not some great ones, but we get a whole bunch of good ones as well. And I'm actually curious now looking at this, has 5e gotten better or worse over time? What it looks like is, it looks like a rising and lowering scale. It looks like it started off bad, but then went good and bad and keeps on repeating. But overall, I think that it's, been doing pretty decently. I mean, it just really comes down to the themes of the adventures because I will say the ones on the lower end of things are definitely hitting on more dreadful and dire themes, and the ones at the higher end of things are usually hitting more on the epic, heroic fantasy themes. So I think, playing into the playstyle of 5th edition with your level 1 adventures is definitely the way to go. So for level 1 adventures, I think they need to go a bit more of the heroic fantasy, epic, awesome style instead of the dreadful, oh yeah, you're totally gonna die style. I think they need to lean in more into that. I'm pleasantly surprised by this tier list, but I'm curious what you all have to say about that. Do you think that my assessment's right in regards of all of the level 1 portions of these 5e adventures? Or do you think that some are incredibly weak? Or do you think that some are actually way stronger than they deserve to be? Go ahead and tell me those things down below because I would love to hear it. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.